So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel on Europe, Secure and Free. I believe the title of this panel is a little bit the theme of this year's Bled Strategy Forum. I'm very glad to be here. It's my first time in Bled. My name is Valbona Zeneli. I'm a fellow with the Atlantic Council of the United States. And I'd like to thank and congratulate the organizers for such a fantastic event. So as I was saying, the title of our panel really captures the theme of this year's Bled Security Forum, which it remains an aspiration, but also a challenge for us. So the question is how Europe can safeguard security, uphold its freedoms, as we heard yesterday, preserve unity in the face of renewed geopolitical tensions all around the world, hybrid threats, and also shifting global power dynamics. Now, I think that the events of recent years in Europe served as a wake-up call for Europeans, reminding us of the Willy Brandt's famous quote that security is not everything, but without security, everything is nothing. Is this for more giving more passion? So security is not about just military strengths. It's about resilience, energy independence, democratic values, and partnerships with allies. So I'm joined here by a fantastic panel, Mr. Elmar Brok, former member of the European Parliament and now senior advisor at the Munich Security Conference. I would say a legend when it comes to foreign policy at the European Parliament. Thank you for being with us here today. Mr. Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania. Thank you. Mr. Alper Coşkun, Senior Fellow with the Europe Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in the United States. Thank you. Mr. Gordan Grlić Radman, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of Croatia. Minister Florian Hahn, Minister of State of the Federal Foreign Office in Germany. Thank you. Mr. Pierre, Heilbronn, Special Envoy for Ukraine's Relief and Reconstruction at the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. Thank you. And Mr. Boštjan Pavlin, State Secretary of the Ministry of Defense of Slovenia. We are 8 here in the panel, and we only have an hour and 15 minutes, but we'll try to make it as most interesting as we can, this panel. So to warm up, I want to start with really a lightning question with lightning responses. And we'll start from Mr. Brok, and we'll go all around. What does that mean for you? The title of the panel, Europe, Secure and Free.
Europe is secure and free if it first of all sticks to the European model, to the European values.
The microphone.
If it sticks to the European values, to the European model, to a free market economy with social responsibilities, cultural freedom, media freedom, and the division of power. And we have to stick to that despite we have within the European Union 1 or 2 countries who do not follow that. Despite we have doubts this idea is followed by the present government in the United States, we are sure it's not followed by Russia and China. And therefore, we have to find strengths for ourselves to stick to our model.
So strengths and stick to our European model.
Strengths, our own strengths, and it means we have to stick to NATO, but we have to be able to defend ourselves without NATO.
And we'll go deeper in the second round. Thank you so much. Mr. Pavlin, Europe, secure and free, very quickly.
Very quickly, so we are discussing about the balance between our way of life and on the other side, the secure. And the point is, as Sir just right now said, we must be aware that the strategic partnership between NATO and EU is irreplaceable. And of course, we must to build our own security, but in reality, in this moment, this partnership is the basic.
Thanks. So, a balanced and strategic partnership.
First of all, it is threatened. So I think about the keywords. So it's threatened, it's challenged, it's not given, It's the mission of ours that we have to implement, and security first, freedom second, and prosperity third, and it will only follow. This precondition, as you described in the very beginning of the discussion, without security, we cannot discuss and talk about anything else.
So security as a basis for
Yes,
everything.
fundamentally.
Thank you so much. And first of all, this question has a very personal meaning, and for Croatia. First of all, we are a proud member of both NATO and the EU, and but not so long a time ago, and we defended our freedom and rights to exist, just as Ukraine is doing now. And the second, this experience of course has taught us that freedom and security are two sides, but on the same coin, and that neither can be taken for granted. And of course, our freedoms and our way of life, as the gentleman mentioned, of course, in this in today's security environment, need to be backed up by credible deterrence of hard power, military power. And so the international or our European engagement in this regard should be shown. And Croatia is doing it utmost just to get along with this endeavor in the European Union, because we cannot no longer rely on soft power and diplomacy only, and we are committed to defending our Europe, one where all states are equal in their rights, responsible in their duties, and of course respond in response to common challenges. And,
so it looks like hard power is back.
Yeah, and when it comes to Croatia, so Croatia does remember what it is to live alone, to live without security and aggression, and we will not go back. And for us, it's very important strengthen, of course, our cooperation and through our common security through cooperation, readiness, and shout propose. It is not an option; it's a must.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn.
Ja, vielen Dank für die Frage. I will talk in German. We have a translation. Vielen Dank für die Frage, und ich will nur sagen, ich bin 1989 politisch aktiv geworden als 15-Jähriger, weil ich begeistert war von dem Fall der Mauer, vom Ende des Eisernen Vorhangs, Ende des Kalten Krieges, und weil ich die Begeisterung hatte, dass jetzt alle verstanden haben, dass Zusammenarbeit, dass Demokratie, dass Freiheit die Zukunft ist. Und wir haben alle diesen Traum gehabt, und wir waren davon überzeugt, dass sich die ganze Welt anschließen wird. Und wir müssen leider erkennen, dass das nicht der Fall ist. Das Recht des Stärkeren setzt sich immer mehr durch, und dieses Erkennen, da sind wir sehr spät dran. Und deswegen müssen wir, um unseren Traum weiter zu leben, unsere Sicherheit stärken, und das können wir nur gemeinsam. Und wie wir das machen, glaube ich, diskutieren wir noch.
Vielen Dank.
So, thank you very much for the question. In 1989, as a 15-year-old, I became politically active. This coincided with the fall of the Berlin Wall, with the end of war and the end of Cold War. At the time, I thought everybody came to know that cooperation is the way for a democratic future. And I thought the world would follow. And nowadays we see this is unfortunately not the case. We see that the law of the stronger is now being applied, and we have to work on strengthening our security. More on how to do this will follow, of course.
Well, thank you. Mr. Heilbronn.
Thank you very much. So I'm coming from a country which loves freedom, in a way exported this aspiration in other countries, and a country which has, with others, lived through wars, and at least has the idea that security and freedom are very much interlinked, and without security you cannot be free. In a way, the two are encapsulated in the very French term you can say about around sovereignty, which is more or less the freedom to be able to define your own course and your own aspiration, not to be a subject of the international relations, but an actor and a power in international relations. So I think, and we'll come back probably to the different aspects of that concept of sovereignty. It has implication in economic terms, in obviously hard power terms, and France has been always advocating for the need to take all our responsibilities in the field of defense for decades. And being independent, which means defining also not being more or less isolated, but being able to define your own future and get a hand on it without being dependent on other views from wherever they come.
Thank you. Mr. Coşkun.
Thank you. I work for the Carnegie Endowment, but I happen to be a former Turkish diplomat, so let me add a little bit of Turkish spice to the debate. When I think of the notion of Europe secure and free and try to answer your question, I think it's important maybe to recognize the fact that neither security nor freedom can be attained in the full sense with a fortress Europe attitude. And I think you hear that from European leaders in terms of reaching out to all candidate countries, obviously, but beyond, and building a neighborhood that is also secure and is up to the extent possible, the standards that the European Union says it stands up for. And I think it was President Macron who said that when we think of the European security landscape, it's better no longer to think in the constraints of institutional definitions and to look beyond that. And that is the Turkish spice, I think, that I'd like to add. But the second important element, in my view, something that everyone has raised, all of these principles, and we heard this in the presidential debate as well, it's really important not only to talk about the principles, but to ensure that there is an unequivocal application without any perception, at least, of double standards in the way that they are implemented, meaning aggression needs to be called out. There needs to be very clean lines drawn between the aggressor and the aggressed. And there should be no doubt, not only in our minds, but more importantly, I think, in the minds of our societies at large and also the aggressors, that we will make that distinction and that international law will apply unequivocally to everyone.
That's a very good point. We'll get deeper into that. But I agree also with the first point that we're talking about security inside EU, but we live in an age of disruption. So Europe has turned from a ring of friends to a ring of fire. So how are we going to react? And I'd like to go back to Mr. Brok. So having observed Europe strategic and security evolution over decades at the European Parliament, where do you see the biggest gaps between political rhetoric in Europe and implementation when it comes to European security? And I want to ask you really, openly, are we getting serious when it comes to defense of Europe?
No.
Microphone, please. You need to repeat it so that everybody hears that.
My longest English speech I ever delivered. I must say that we have a lot of rhetoric. Since Macron's Sorbonne speech, we know that on the agenda is autonomous sovereignty or sovereign autonomy.
Strategic autonomy.
And this is not, as you said, totally stand on its own alone. That is a misunderstanding of that. But no Europeans, even no German chancellor, has answered to that. At least not the last 2 months. The present one is going to answer that. And this is an important point. When you talk about foreign policy and security, you have to think always about the most unluckiest situation, to be prepared for that. In a moment, we hope the Americans defend us, and Article 5 is there. But who believes it in reality? And when we see how we develop, for example, the strength of our armies, now it's a lot of money available, but we do it in an old way that everyone believes that he can defend its own national sovereignty. We have 15 tanks in Europe, the Americans won. We have 180 weapon systems, the Americans have 35. The German tank costs 17 million euros. The American, 8 million. For sure, the German is the better one, but not double better. And because we do it by hand, we have no European industrial policy for defense goods. Here we have to go forward. We have to know that there is no national sovereignty of in Germany, in Europe, for any European country possible, because everyone is too weak. The former Commission President from Luxembourg, Juncker, has said, look, he knows as Luxembourger that there is small and big countries in Europe, but looking from Washington or Beijing or Moscow, the biggest one has not learned that they are also small. And that is our main problem. If we can now not in this situation together to have our own capabilities for the bad moment that we cannot rely on NATO anymore, we don't know. If, for example, in the United States, after Trump Vance becomes, I'm worried. And we have only a short moment time to do such things together. We have to look for NATO. It's all right to do that. But if not, we have to be ready for that. And here, we are not in a situation to do so. And I see speeches everywhere, including in my own country. Europe, yes, we have to do it Europe. In a practical sense, the structures, how they're done, it's still the national structures in many fields. And here we have to change that. And here we need also more courage. We need a better decision-making procedure. I heard yesterday the wonderful speeches about enlargement, but keeping with the veto system. 37 European countries with a veto in foreign policy and defense, it's ridiculous. It's the end of Europe. If we are not ready to come to here change, then we will see that the European Union will not go forward. We have already now, the best thing for Europe was that smaller and bigger countries were sitting on one table with same rights. But if it does not work because of the veto principle, the big ones will do it again. The French, the Germans, with the British and others, and the others will be out. And therefore, for example, to have no change in the decision-making procedures, no enlargement is my opinion. I'm strongly for Western Balkan membership, not to be misunderstood. I've worked my whole political life for that. But not by destroying the European Union without changing, by not changing the decision-making procedures, the structures of the European Union. But who is there? Where are the Mitterrands and Kohls and others and Delors to fight for that, to have the ideas for that? And this is, I think, the crucial moment. The rest of the thing, yes, wonderful. I like it.
But what do we need to do? Because you said we're not serious.
Decision-making procedures, I said in defense, for example, have joint industrial policy on defense, have standardization, look for the common place for what we need. Now, is not everyone on its own, together. Sometimes it's simple things, but do it together. The old structures. In Germany, we had in the Cold War, in the Beschaffungsamt, the procurement office, 8,000 people with 500,000 soldiers. Now we have 13,000 civil servants by 180,000 soldiers. And this is the total wrong way. Do it European together and not say all the time, no, we have not to do it with the French because they want only our money. Or the French say, oh, no, we cannot do it with the Germans because they want to have a word in that and we cannot decide alone. And all that stuff is a disaster. And if you do not learn in this second, by Putin on one side and Trump on the other side, if we see China in that, we are at a moment in a situation that three powers want to share the world with each other, without the Europeans. That Trump wants to have Greenland and Canada is, to have his power base together. He does not stick to Europe. And all three agree that to destroy the European Union in order to weaken the member states in the European Union because all are small that they can deal with them as they like. And if we do not change that picture, that we use the European potential together in the trade negotiations. The Germans wanted to have own deals on automobile cars. The French on cognac. The Poles say, oh, we can do nothing against the United States because Article 5, we have to, I can understand their territorial situation. But altogether is that the Europeans had no power to negotiate. Modi does see it others.
Yeah.
and are taken seriously, because even now, because of this system, we cannot use fully our potential. We are the biggest trading power in the world. We are the best, or the second best internal market of the world. We are rich. We have more soldiers than the United States. We have 3 times so many inhabitants as Russia, but weak. Do we understand that? They played with us by the 3 superpowers of the world, or we will play our own role to keep our identity, to be free in that sense, even also in a cultural way. Last example. I was in Munich, the Vance speech. What he said, customs on goods, where we are strong, stronger, more competitive as the Americans. Therefore, it's the deficit there. But the tech companies, the American one, if we have our own European legislation on that field, Trump says, this is against the freedom of speech. No, it is against the American interest of a few companies, which each of them has a higher value as the GNP of most of the European member countries. And we cannot protect ourselves together with that, not via taxation, now via rules. And he says, if we will follow our route and do not take away the legislation of the European Union, in that sense, he will get higher customs, higher tariffs. And this we have to understand. I think for the moment it was right to have the nice European leaders around the writing table in the Oval Office. But this picture I do not want to see all the time. It's like a school class for the schoolmaster. That cannot be the European future.
Well, thank you very much. It looks like all the elements are there, but we need to have a change of the mindset on how to use those elements for strengthening
I feel
European
that the
unity.
population is further than our leaders.
Exactly, I agree with you. Mr. Budrys, Lithuania has been on the front line when it comes to defense and deterrence. What lessons can Europe learn from your own experience? And I would like to follow up on the response of Mr. Brok, saying that it looks like we are in these conferences, we come to these conferences, and we keep repeating the very same stuff, at least for the very last 10 years. So we need to do this, we need to do that, and we keep admiring the problems without really going straight forward into solutions. So what is the experience of Lithuania? What can they tell us to the other Europeans, how it needs to be done?
That small countries on the front line and so much exposed to Russia, to other aggressive actors, can themselves to get more secure through reducing vulnerabilities. That was our lesson of 35 years of regained independence from the very 1990. So we just claimed independence 1990, and Russia immediately, then the Soviet Union, immediately imposed sanctions on us. No oil products, even the railways were stopped, no supplies, just to show that you will collapse and you will crawl to us back and ask us to be once again the Soviet Union. We learned that lesson, and then they were coming again and again with the manipulation, with gas supplies, with oil supplies, disrupting the crude oil coming to Lithuania, with different transport problems that they were imposing on us. Then cyber threats that we've seen starting from 2007, 2008. I remember then I was working in intelligence. We found the Russian advanced persistent threat-related actors, agents running in our sensitive classified networks. We had everything that you can imagine, up to the very political corruption that was also related to Russia. We had our president impeached, the only one in Europe, because of his relations with Russia. So you name something, we had it in Lithuania. So we've seen it all, and we learned our lesson, how we have to tackle with it. So what concerns energy, we have to diversify our sources. 2003-04, we were 100% dependent on gas supplies, and we had even Gazprom increasing its share in our main gas company. So we had to reduce the influence of Russian capital. We had to diversify resources. We had to build the LNG terminal. We did it all, and now we have zero. And the same with electricity. We knew
so the
that.
question is, how did you do that? What was different in
Because
Lithuania
those
compared to the
answers,
other European countries?
first of all, and this is my years and years of discussions with my friends, colleagues in Europe. First of all, we have to agree on the picture, what is the threat. because it's too often the false premises were done about the Russia, how they act. This is the whole of government approach in theirs, how they approach the neighboring countries and the others. And I'm not ever feeling that Baltics are the soft belly of Europe. No, we are not. I know soft bellies that are more further to the west from our country, where Russians are targeting. So they have those thousands of people, employers. We know these structures that are paid from early morning till the evening to do harm on you, to make you weaker, to manipulate, to run these huge campaigns for your elections. So you have to resist all of it. So first step is to know the enemy. The second, know your vulnerabilities. We know all those networks of organizations that were used as the cover for the different influence operations. And I saw the eyes of the colleagues when we were saying, shut it down, because they're using it against you. It's not about the cultural cooperation, Россотрудничество. That's the cover organization for the intelligence operations. Shut it down, but we cannot, it would look not nice. Same with the television. We are the first country in Europe that were shutting down their cable TVs because of war propaganda just after 2014, after the Crimea campaign. Yes, we were criticized, but we grounded it, and what is now the normal practice in Europe, that is shutting down those channels will reduce your exposure and vulnerability. This is how you're going further. And we are in a position now, the Baltic countries, to share those lessons. We know how it is, how they're doing. This is a pattern. They are just, repeating and repeating the same mechanisms. And something that is not working in the Baltics works in the Balkans and works, for example, in Brussels and in other places.
But the playbook is the same.
Yes, same with the cyber. We know what to do. Of course, you need some will. Of course, there would be, needed to review some regulation, like in our case with the political resistance, and to reduce Russia's influence into our elections, we have to review all the legislation on elections. So now it is prohibited for private entities and for the companies to finance the campaigns. But that was the lesson, because otherwise the Russian capital is just waiting to give away their cutbacks and to put into the political machine. This is how it works. Resilience, first of all, because you can build the fortress, you can build strong defenses and a hard power, hard steel, put them in front, show to everyone.
You talk about
but
resilience,
you can be soft.
But
Yeah.
In 2016, when the European Union came up with the security strategy in 2016, resilience was mentioned everywhere. I think it was mentioned more than 30 or 40 times, but many countries did not know even how to translate that.
I'm not taking each situation, each picture that, and I just try to assess whether it is good, bad, whether it's, the situation is tragic. It evolves. Even in Lithuania, of course, we're also talking a lot about, for example, about the civil defense, about the defense of the civil components, role of the civil components in the time of war. But only after 2022, we saw what does it mean in Ukraine. Of course, we're learning, but we have to move forward. And for that purpose, we have to employ the tools that we have. And this is, for example, EU INSAN is one of the places which we can employ into viewing our all vulnerabilities and helping each other. And you know why it doesn't work, to the level where it has to be? Because we don't trust each other. And this is then a problem. We know that I have some sensitivities, I have some weak spots, and for me to reveal it to you, for you to help me, we need to cross something. And in this, we have to be then sure and look into each other's eye and tell each other whether we are on the same page, whether we are on the same boat, whether those who are vetoing the enlargement, for example, same countries are vetoing other things, are strategically with us. This is the main question for Europe. If we want to build Europe as a geopolitical actor, we have to be on the same page. We have to trust each other. And this is what we like. It's not only about the adversaries. It's about us also.
No, thank you. It goes also back to, why we should, work together for a European defense, industrial defense base. But if we don't have trust, that will be very difficult. Mr. Hahn, under Chancellor Merz, and with the new also defense budget of Germany, which will go up to $108 billion, which will be twice the budget of France also for the very first time in the recent history. This signals a major Bundeswehr expansion and a new approach to German security in Europe and NATO. So my question, and also the aspiration, is that Germany will have the strongest and the biggest army in Europe in the future. So how do you assess Germany's evolving role in European defense architecture?
Lassen Sie mich als erstes sagen, dass Deutschland viel zu lange zu wenig gemacht hat. glaube, wir haben alle seit 2014 kein Erkenntnisproblem, sondern wir haben ein Geschwindigkeitsproblem. Und die neue Bundesregierung mit Kanzler Friedrich Merz hat sich deswegen vorgenommen, deutlich an Geschwindigkeit zuzulegen. Und das ist bitter nötig, denn das ist das, was Elmar Brok vorher gesagt hat. Wir haben tatsächlich keine Zeit. Putin meint es ernst. Vielleicht erstmal den Teil.
Well, let me say that, and firstly, Germany did too little, for too long, too little. And since 2014, we did not have trouble recognizing the threat. We had trouble adjusting our speed. And the new federal government is doing just that. We are increasing the speed with which we are developing our armed forces. As Elmar Brok said today, there is no time. Putin is serious.
Dass wir keine Zeit haben, zeigt allein, wie die Produktionskapazitäten auf der russischen Seite aussehen. Putin ist in der Lage, in 4-facher Geschwindigkeit Munition herzustellen, ist in der Lage, in 10-facher Geschwindigkeit Kampfpanzer herzustellen. Hier ist Europa viel zu langsam. Wir müssen entsprechend unsere Kapazitäten industriell ausbauen. Wir müssen mehr Geld zur Verfügung stellen. Das tun wir jetzt endlich. Aber an der Stelle möchte ich auch sagen, die 5% ist nicht ein Lippenbekenntnis, sondern die 5% müssen auch tatsächlich von allen eingehalten werden.
The fact is that we have no time. If we have a look at Russian production capacities, they have 4-time ammunition production speed, 10-time speed for tanks, and Europe is just too slow in this regard. We have increased investment, and the 5% pledge should not be only lip service. We have to make it happen, and everybody has to.
Und zur Wahrheit gehört auch, dass es uns sozusagen in allen Bereichen an Fähigkeiten fehlt, wenn es darum geht, tatsächlich selbst alleine abschreckend wirken zu können. Und deswegen ist es richtig, dass Kanzler Merz jetzt mit der neuen Bundesregierung dieses große Finanzpaket auf den Weg gebracht hat. Und die Frage ist, wie stellen wir uns vor, wie wird Deutschland dann in einer Sicherheitsarchitektur in Europa, welche Rolle wird es haben? Es wird auf der einen Seite natürlich mit Blick auf die Größe des Landes die Rolle haben, das Land zu sein, was die größte Armee an Köpfen hat. Aber das alleine reicht nicht.
The truth is we are lacking in pretty much all areas. We have to improve our self-made deterrence. And the financial package passed by Chancellor Merz is the right path. We have to see what kind of a role Germany will be playing in the future security architecture, since we are the largest country with the largest army in Europe.
Aber auch das reicht nicht, sondern es geht darum, eben auch unabhängig zu werden. Europa muss unabhängig werden, wenn es darum geht, wenn wir über Fähigkeiten sprechen. Fähigkeiten im Bereich des sozusagen digitalen Raums, wenn es darum geht, wie wird künstliche Intelligenz in Zukunft eingesetzt, wer hat eigentlich die Kontrolle über Space. Auch das sind alles militärische Themen, bei denen Europa selbstständig werden muss, Fähigkeiten entwickeln muss. Und hier kann Deutschland, denke ich, mit Blick auf unser Know-how und unsere Fähigkeiten einen großen Beitrag leisten.
But this is not enough. Europe has to become more independent. We need more independent when it comes to relevant skills, especially in the digital space, taking into account artificial intelligence technologies and control over those. And Europe has to become independent in this space, and I think Germany, with its know-how, can be one of the larger contributors.
Hier reichen keine 500 Milliarden, die Deutschland auf den Weg bringt. Hier muss zusammengearbeitet werden. Das können wir nur gemeinsam tatsächlich stemmen. Und das muss in den nächsten Jahren, und das will ich ausdrücklich sagen, darf nicht erst in 10 Jahren passieren. Wir dürfen nicht wieder 10 Jahre nur reden, sondern wir müssen heute anfangen. Wir müssen gestern schon angefangen haben, tatsächlich das endlich gemeinsam auf den Weg zu bringen.
The 500 billion that Germany will invest will definitely not be enough. Only together we will be able to master this task. And we have to work fast. It's not enough to just wait and see. We have to start. In 10 years, it will be too late. We should have actually started yesterday.
Also welche Rolle soll Deutschland haben? Ich persönlich wünsche mir, dass wir Frontrunner sind im Bereich tatsächlich als eine Frontrunner-Nation, wenn es darum geht, Europa endlich unabhängig zu machen und verteidigungsfähig zu machen.
So the role I want Germany to play in this Europe, definitely the role of a frontrunner nation in an independent Europe that is able to defend itself.
Mr. Hahn, just let me follow up. Do we also have a change of the mindset in Germany? And also, I mean, how do you see that in Europe? Because sometimes it looks like we're talking about money and like throwing money to the problems will not really resolve them. Maybe just things will become more expensive, as Mr. Brok was saying. Just tanks will become more expensive in Germany and other places in Europe. So is there really a change of the mindset? Do you feel that in the government, but also in the society?
Ja, da bin ich mir sicher, dass es diesen Change tatsächlich gibt. Wenn wir uns die Umfragen anschauen, dann sehen wir, dass die Bevölkerung ganz anders als noch vor wenigen Jahren bereit ist, Steuergeld in die eigene Sicherheit zu stecken. Wir sehen, dass eine höhere Bereitschaft da ist, tatsächlich auch was zur Verteidigungsfähigkeit beizutragen. Wir sehen, dass die Bewerberzahlen bei der Bundeswehr nicht zurückgehen. Insofern habe ich dort ein gutes Gefühl, aber es ist noch nicht so stark ausgeprägt wie bei unseren Nachbarn, die durch die direkte Nachbarschaft zur Russischen Föderation natürlich von der Bedrohung noch direkter betroffen sind.
Well, I'm sure that the change is happening. If we have a look at the polls in comparison to just a few years ago, people are prepared to spend taxpayer money for defense. We also see that the number of new recruits in our armed forces is staying stable. And I believe that the sentiment is not as strong as, for example, in our neighboring countries that are also neighboring on Russia.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Coşkun, so you are a European, but you live in the United States. We're talking a lot about European security, but I want to bring here the conversation also regarding the U.S. What is the role of the United States in European security? And how do U.S. expectations actually on Europe contributions differ from Europe's self-perception on its own security?
Yes, thank you. So now I'll give a U.S. perspective. And I think, let me start out by saying that we need to contextualize the conversation in the sense that this is really a norm-breaking moment. But the debate that the transatlantic partners have had as far as burden sharing or burden shifting is concerned is an old one, and that's why I want to quote something that you wrote, Valbona, actually, for the Atlantic Council, where you made the point that it was President Eisenhower as early on as in 1953 when he told the European allies that the well of the United States might actually run out at one point, implying obviously that Europe will need to do more. Now, that debate has been a current theme. It's had spikes now and then in Europe, but I think it's at its peak right now. But what's different today is that it happens in a very different norm-breaking moment, if you will, in the sense that, of course, we now have war in Europe ever since the Russian attack against Ukraine. And when you look at the broader landscape, obviously, we have the ongoing devastation in Gaza with impunity. But there's also another element to these disruptive elements in the geopolitical landscape that happens to come from the other side of the Atlantic, from the United States. It is a very different animal when you look at the United States under this current administration for a couple of reasons, but I think most relevant to our conversation is the fact that you no longer seem to have an administration in the United States that really values its partnerships. It takes them for granted, and this is based on the actions of the United States and the words and the oscillations, if you will. And that obviously has significant implications as to how this equation will unfold. But there's another element that compounds the challenge, I think, and that's that the United States' priorities obviously are changing. There was a leaked document from the Pentagon that was written in the press about in March speaking of the upcoming force posture review that the United States will be implementing. And it seemed from that leaked document that the U.S. security establishment, if you will, is of the view that the United States can afford taking security risks in Europe and other places so as to prioritize its security interests against a rising China. And I think that explains...
But that was already back in 2009 with President Obama. That was the very first time of the pivoting.
Definitely. It's not something new, but I think it has not been translated to this effect into policy, and I think you see this in the rhetoric coming out of Washington as well. But I will end on with three notes, one positive, one negative, and a third one which will negate the two other notes that I make. The positive note is that this background, I think, lends itself well to the aspirations that we see among European nations, particularly the European Union as well, to build its strategic autonomy, to break its chains from this over-reliance to the United States. And in the United States, I believe there is an increasing critical mass that is being formed in the belief of this need, which was not the case in the past. I think the U.S. in the past was simply paying lip service to the idea, but now you come across an increasing amount of literature that explains the rationale from a U.S. perspective as to why Europe needs to do more. So that's a good thing, in my view, in terms of this debate for Europe in particular. But there's a catch, as there always should be, and that's my second point, which is the negative one. The U.S. does not mean, by saying this, that it is ready to surrender its outsized role in this equation. And I think it was quite evident in the way that it has gone about in the negotiations on Ukraine without the Europeans at some moments in time with Russia directly. And you can see that in the rhetoric, I think, coming out of the White House. And, you have to look at certain images from different angles. I think one of the most iconic images in our recent times was that meeting in the White House with President Trump and European leaders. I heard some European leaders mention the fact, rightfully so, that was necessary. Flattery goes a long way in Washington nowadays, and that was the way in which the United States was brought on board to the idea of backstopping a security force. So I understand that rationale, but you also have to bear in mind how it's proceeded in the United States, and it was exemplified perfectly, and this is the right station to look at for this, in Fox News, where the correspondent was speaking to President Trump, and very emphatically, he said, that was such a fantastic scene. All the European leaders were sitting across from you, Mr. President, and the U.S. was on top. That's how they see it. So that, I think, speaks well to this mentality and the approach in Washington, which actually is negative. And the third element, which may negate all of these and make them irrelevant, is that we're in a moment in the United States that political scientists are describing as executive overreach, executive aggrandizement, which translates into really an over-centralization of power in the executive branch. But in the case of the United States, it's even not the executive branch as a branch itself, but in an individual, President Trump himself. You see the way the cabinet meetings are taking place in Washington nowadays. And I think that leaves everyone, the rest of the world as well, given the impact that the United States has on a global level, to the mercy of the whims of President Trump, where I think there's a big risk. So that sort of negates the first two elements, because it really all depends on what President Trump feels like doing, and I think we see this playing out in action.
Well, thank you.
Right,
we don't have much time to go deeper into some of the other things that were achieved, like the trade deal, and maybe we can discuss that, all the criticism that it got into European capitals, which I personally think that was not a bad deal for the European Union. But there have been some positive achievements over the last few months or weeks, let's say. Minister Radman, so you said that freedom and security are two sides of the same coin, and also you talked about partnerships. Mr. Brok mentioned enlargement. So I'd like to come to you to look from the perspective of security defense. Every time that we've talked about the Western Balkans, in this case, but we can talk Eastern Europe, Ukraine, and Moldova too, we have seen that from the economic perspective. But we have not paid much attention to what these countries can bring for the security and defense of Europe. How do you view enlargement from the security and defense perspective?
First of all, on the security, I will highlight the importance of security, and security is connected with the Western Balkans. And today, security is more than a hard military power. So, however essential might it be, you know that there is not only threats, Kęstutis mentioned, and or coming with, don't arrive with tanks, missiles, and so on. Also the Russian and others and hybrid activities and have shown us that, and of course malign influence from certain countries when it comes to the Western Balkans. But however, also the security is also includes their energy and security, and energy security is very important just in securing our critical infrastructure, and of course diversifying our energy sources and partners. And Croatia is a good example for that, and having in mind that we on island Krk, we have two very important sources. First of all, LNG terminal. It's not a part of Croatia, island Krk, which is enabled to supply the region and beyond, also our neighbors. And my government, having in mind that the phasing out our dependency on Russian gas and oil and became crucial, we decided on our government to double down its capacity from now present 2.9 up to 6.1. And besides LNG terminal, there is also Adriatic oil pipeline as well. So these initiatives are not only national projects, they are also European assets. And when it comes to, of course, the economic and also stability, it's also very important. It's also critical, and I think a secure Europe should also invest not only in the large economies, but also in the small ones, and that no region becomes, of course, vulnerable. But democratic cohesion is also very important. Just we don't want to lose, of course, trust in our institutions and elections, media, and so we be otherwise vulnerable, and regardless of our defense spending. And now on enlargement, it's my favorite topic, really. And so there is my colleague and foreign minister and friend of Albania here, and so you know that Croatia is unwavering vocal proponent of their enlargement in Western Balkans. So this region belongs to the European Union. Croatia itself, so we fulfilled all our foreign policy goals. Okay, let's just put it on OECD member on the side. We are on the good way to fulfill our full membership next approximately in June next year. But what is important for us? Croatia doesn't need anything. What we need is just stable, peaceful Western Balkans. And Croatia is willing to invest politically and to be engaged strongly and with its expertise, experience, and to share with our Western Balkans and friends. But of course, the two, I think so, enduring challenges are there. I have to mention it. Just the unresolved legacies war. We still heavily influenced the situation in the region and affected the stability. And of course, weaknesses in democratic institutions. So it's something that we have to work on that together. And Croatia is ready to support, as I mentioned, with its expertise, with its experience. We are already on the way too. Also with Serbia, with Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia, and Kosovo as well. We want to also include Kosovo in the international institutions. When it comes, for example, Bosnia and Herzegovina...
May I just interrupt you here? For a long time, the European Union, the institutions, favored stability over democracy in the Western Balkans. Do you think that that's changing now? Because you mentioned some of the cases of countries where we have a backsliding in democratic developments.
Actually, it is something that, Croatia worked hard to achieve to fulfill all criteria. And the first generation were imposed to Croatia, it was the benchmarks. And we work hard to fulfill it. But however, hard work does pay off. And for us our approach is merit-based, individual achievements is something that there are no shortcuts. You know that when it comes to the enlargement, it is not just about to bringing more countries in. It is a European. We want to complete a European project, and it is crucial. But of course, European Union is ready. But we want to see also the other sides, so that we can compare some improvement in such in the region and however. But so I see that Albania is ready. Albania doesn't have any border disputes in a homogeneous society, and Montenegro as well. But so we had today morning the working breakfast also with Foreign Minister of Slovenia, and we are regularly gathering and speaking how we can do more. But of course there is a mutual. So we need also from your side, from countries and from the Western Balkans. They are not. We should just to increase prospect on those countries that are fully aligned with our values and policy, and of course to apply for those countries who want a membership but also engage in the hybrid activities. And so European Union should recognize these two types of countries in the Western Balkans. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Heilbronn, Ukraine has been discussed over the last 2 days, and of course, France is one of the few countries in Europe that has a special envoy showing the importance for the reconstruction of Ukraine, and we all know that this is a litmus test for the future of Europe, how the security of the future of Ukraine will play out. So how can we ensure, not just specifically as a country, but in the framework of the European Union, that rebuilding efforts of Ukraine are not only about physical infrastructure, but also strengthening resilience and democratic institutions in Ukraine? That's my first part. And the second part of the question, which is very important too, how do we ensure, in terms of competitiveness also of European companies, that the European companies are in the front lines in the reconstruction of Ukraine, and we won't have Chinese or other countries' companies that will deal with reconstruction?
No, thank you very much for these two questions. So first, the question which is linked to building a more or less a member of the European family, which is democratic, where the civil society is continuing its vibrant role. I think there are two dimensions to that. First, by strengthening the rule of law, and I think we have now the tools which we've put together at the European level, in fact, to be on the front line, because sometimes we were relying too much on the American, and USA idea has done a lot of things on the fight against corruption, on business environment. Myself coming before from the EBRD, where the US is the first shareholder, has done a lot also in the country there. But I think the Ukraine plan, the milestone, which are completely owned by the Ukrainian government, are a really important element to ground a continuous effort on that field. And recent events, for example, around the anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine have shown that it's not because President Zelensky is a hero in his country in times of war that these temptation of hindering or undermining what we've built over the last, since Maidan, in fact, is completely should be taken as a given. And the accession process is all about that. And I think we have a special responsibility there, and it's bearing fruits. Also, and that's also something important, that Ukraine has made progress even in the international ranking of countries on that, for example, in Transparency International. It's above, I don't want to be rude to Turkey or to Bosnia, but Ukraine is above these countries in these rankings. You can say rankings are always disputable, but at least there are an element in this discussion, and that shows that also effort pays, and it's not a lost element. The second dimension is by supporting, I think, the Ukrainian civil society and local communities, because it's the second front of the war. It's the civil society, which we saw can avoid mistakes, but also get the Ukrainian society together on something which very much is aligned with the European objectives, the European dream, and including the Ukrainian civil society in all the discussions we are having about the future of Ukraine is another element. The local dimension is also a very important element. That's why I think we should focus much more, because it's an element of democratic sustainability of Ukraine, the role of mayors, the role of local communities, and devising instruments. Germany is doing a great work on that, having also a federal model. But we have been focusing very much on that level. The second question is on private sector, and that's, I think, a crucial element if we want not to have a country which, at the end of the day, is owned by sometimes by owners which are non-European. Obviously, Ukraine in Europe is a huge strategic asset for Europe, and I think this positive narrative has to come across much more. Obviously, not only on critical and raw material, on defense, on tech, on everything, on nuclear, I would say, as a Frenchman. But for that, I think we should have European companies in Ukraine, and not only having Ukrainian tech companies being bought out by Silicon Valley companies. And that requires a bit of courage, a little bit of less risk aversion. It happens that French companies...
But also support from governments.
Yes, it's a mixture of the two. And I think now we have the toolbox at national and European level to, for example, in terms of risk coverage linked to the war. But you see, there are some entrepreneurs. I take one who was done, who happens to be French, but who has put 1.5 billion euros in Ukraine a few weeks ago, buying both the fixed and third mobile network, who is French. Putting 1.5 billion euros, which is the largest investment since Maidan in Ukraine in times of war, mean that there are some people without, by the way, the support of the state, or the French state, for this example, who are voting more or less their trust to the future of their investment, but the future of this country. So I would say that's very important. Working on the toolbox to have even more investment in Ukraine is very important. Having them also now is important, because you mentioned Chinese. For the time being, they are not welcome in Ukraine because of the stance of China. But each time I'm going to Ukraine, I'm going there every month and a half, I see Chinese entrepreneurs who are trying to get their way to have public procurements. For the time being, they've not been very successful. Also because other investors have been present. Japanese have been extremely active and supportive of Ukraine. But I think it's also the presence of European business in Ukraine is an issue for the future European sovereignty and making the most of Ukraine being member of the European Union one day.
Well, thank you. Well, actually, I mean, with the news from yesterday from the meetings in Beijing and the calling actually for the changes of the rules of the international order, I don't think we're discussing it enough, even here in this conference, because that is going to impact European security and European competitiveness in the future. But maybe in the last round we can come back to that. Mr. Pavlin, last but not least, as the host of the Bled Security Forum, Bled Strategy Forum. So, Slovenia's perspective, from Slovenia's perspective, what constitutes an optimal level of defense spending when it comes to other societal sectors that need the government money? So how do you view that from that perspective? We're all talking about the 5%. Is that enough? Is that not enough? So what is that from the Slovenia's perspective? And to what extent should Europe develop independent, we were mentioned this question, defense capabilities while upholding NATO commitments? So I'd like to bring back the conversation on European and NATO.
So we in Europe, we establish some higher society. Actually, in Europe, the society is the very and the most important. And every time when we are talking about our security and defense, we must be aware that that maybe in some other states outside of the Europe is easier to have all of the government approach, or maybe something like has been defense before. But I'm sure that in Europe country, we all must have all society approach, because people really must understand and people must be aware, and we are used to know, understand, and this is the reason for our regulation and our act. And of course, if we talk about defense expenditure, of course, we think that Slovenia is example that we are sleeping in all those years, and of course, as we talked before about the threat, also the recognition of the threat from Russia is the different in the Baltic, in Slovenia, and maybe in Canada, and this is some ways logical, but the main point is the trust that we mentioned at the beginning, and the trust is something that we must establish in the higher standard and higher level. And I hope that one day we will not talk about that Slovenia will do this, German will do this, or maybe Lithuania will do this, but that we will do this. Today in the morning, our president mentioned more maybe as idea, but she mentioned that maybe we must think about the United States of Europe. Maybe we must think about some new regulation. But of course, first of all, we must do, this debate must be in all our countries, but if this approach which we have today doesn't give the answers, then we must bring some other solution. But dependencies, the bigger problem from my point of view is dependencies. Of course, we have dependencies regarding security, regarding the army forces, but maybe even more important, we have dependencies in the supply chain. We have the very big dependencies about logistic support, and we sell a lot of our main industries. And now when we have a problem, we think about what should we do now, of course. So first of all, I think that we must come back to ourselves. Let's say we in Slovenia, we done last year one very big exercise, which was called Resilience 24. We prepared 1 year. And through this exercise, we stress all the state, and we really, after the conclusion, we bring out the big action plan, and I think that also Europe must bring out a very detailed action plan, because it's not enough the report of Mario Draghi. Because it's not enough the report of Ms. Albanese of the United Nations, but after that we don't have any action. We don't have any action which can stop some act. So of course, and Slovenia is the example that. The strategic communication, it's very important that our people are used to understand what are the steps. And this is also one of the topics which we must also bring in the higher level, of course, also the defense expenditure.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 10 minutes of time, and I'd like to go for some very quick questions. Mr. Hahn, I'd like to come back to you regarding enlargement. Is that in the priorities of the German government? We know that it is in the U.S. government's priorities.
Überhaupt gar keine Frage. Die Erweiterung Europas und sozusagen die Vollendung der Integration auch des Westbalkans hat für uns absolute Priorität. Dafür steht der Außenminister Johann Wadefuhl und dafür steht auch Bundeskanzler Merz, überhaupt keine Frage. Natürlich müssen Hausaufgaben erledigt werden, aber Deutschland ist auch immer dabei, hier auch zu unterstützen. Wir wollen, dass das Enlargement kommt.
Danke.
This is no question at all. Enlargement and the full integration of the Western Balkans is one of the priority actions envisioned by Foreign Minister Wadefuhl and Chancellor Merz. Of course, the countries have to do their homework, but Germany is here to support.
Thank you. Pierre, you talked about strategic autonomy. My question is European strategic autonomy compatible with transatlantic security, or do we risk duplications and divisions?
No, I think they are completely compatible. And by the way, President Trump respect much more people who have also some capacity to be independent than people who are just going to beg support. I think the two are compatible, and they have to be managed over time. That's why President Macron has been, by the way, with him when he met President Trump the first time to convince him that you should meet Zelensky. Finally, it didn't happen as we had expected, more or less. But also he pushed the fact that this visit in Washington should be also a way to support President Zelensky in showing that nothing can be decided on the back of Ukrainians, but also on Europeans, being able to also assert themselves as with all the instruments of a political and geopolitical power. And defense is part of that. Obviously, we've taken in the 50s a choice which is to have a complete army, which is with nuclear deterrence capabilities, which is maybe the extreme case where you are completely independent on the sea, the sky, and the land. It costs much more. Obviously, over decades, it has a cost. probably now we have not the capacity, some have, and especially Germany, in terms of public finance, to continue at least this course, even if we're intending to double again our budget on defense. But I think the industrial question is also that by saying, in the short term, we don't have a choice than buying outside Europe, should be a question diagnosis you have once. You cannot be say that 3 years ago, today exactly saying the same thing. We have no choice than buying American weapons or Korean weapons. So we have to be in a place, I know, in 6 months, in 2 years, by an acceleration of this agenda so that we have other choices. But at the same time, as we build this capacity, we have to engage with the US, obviously. We have to engage with the whole world. And this transatlantic relationship is very important, by the way, to solve many problems in the world. So it's not either or, I think, but to be able to be taken credibly by the outside world, you have to build this European capability, by the way, with Ukraine when you talk about defense.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly, Lithuania has been one of the countries that has suffered economic coercion from China. How do you view the role of China in the European Union, the European Union's policy on China when it comes to the strategic partnership that they have, the no limits partnership they have with Russia? Very quickly.
Economic security first. We have to prioritize, and we cannot expose ourselves once again with our vulnerabilities to the external powers that are willing to exploit those vulnerabilities for political purposes, as it happened with Lithuania. And not once, actually. There were only 2 countries in the world that used economic coercion against us, Russia and China. Belarusians were threatening all the time, but they didn't. And actually, who did that? That was China, starting from 2014, following the meeting of my president with Dalai Lama, and then again and again, finally to 2021, with full-scale options on us. So for the small state, the lesson that we learned, this is decoupling. There are no other option. If you imagine that you can manage it vis-a-vis China, with its all big machine, you cannot. And till we are not so much geoeconomically united and working as the bloc within the European Union, as
and
we
with
don't,
the United States.
then we cannot resist that, and we can't counter leverage. There are larger powers. Yes, I see and I hear, like Germany, France, that can manage those risks. But even now we see how exposed you are with some of the dependencies in the production chains. So we have to be very realistic with what we are dealing, and without the anti-coercion instruments being used against China, till they see no consequences for what they're doing, till they can beat the small one like Lithuania as they imagine, then it will repeat and repeat itself, and that's the only solution for us, and we learned it, and that's what we are doing. We won't be exposed again ever to any hostile power that would love to use it for the political purposes.
Well, thank you. We have 2 minutes left, and I have one final round, just one word of a response. If we were to come back here next year, and if we finish in time, they will invite me back as a moderator. If you could name, we'll start with Mr. Brok, one action Europe must take in order to be at a better place when it comes to security next year, and we meet next year here.
The European leaders have to understand that the European leaders have to understand that a coordinated common strength is much more than the sum of divided national capabilities.
Thank you. Please.
I think that the most important is in this moment that we are trust that Europe trust and NATO, and we take this time to develop ourselves to receive a much higher security element for our own.
So collaboration with NATO. Mr. Budrys.
For me, it's not the word, it's number. Defense spending. What will be defense spending next year? For next year, for Lithuania, will be 5.25%. We will be the number 1 across all the free world. And I want to see the other numbers, how we are fulfilling our commitments, 5%, how fast we are going. I want to see the numbers next year.
Mr. Radman.
I think so, because we work with proponent of enlargement, it would definitely be to adequately address the ongoing political crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And so we learn from European federalism for Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this approach stems from country's history and its multi-ethnic character or features, and we want this country to be functional and stable. That means we need to change the electoral law in Bosnia and Herzegovina to eliminate all forms of discrimination during the election process.
Thank you.
And to start with the negotiation with Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hahn.
I said before that one problem is the speedness of Europe and the speed. And so next year I hope we will have more speed, and the difference between the speed of Russia and us is less.
Thank you. Pierre?
Just to build on what Elmar Brok said, because I completely agree on that, I think Ukraine can be also a help in speeding up our efforts and the awareness of Europeans, because on defense they are moving much more quickly than we are. And in a way, industrial cooperation jointly with Ukraine would help Europeans to speed up.
Thank you. Alper?
Sorry, very quickly, maybe make sure that this notion of strategic autonomy is more than just a political slogan, and also make sure that when the approach to the matter reflects the reality that security is a wider concept, both in terms of content, but also in terms of reflecting the realities and legacy of the European continent as a whole.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us in this panel, and please join me in giving a round of applause to the panelists. It's great to have you in front of you.